Okay, hello. My name is Dhiravamso, Venerable Dhiravamso. Because you don't know who I am. Last time I came here, actually a couple of months ago, one of the men said to me, he said, "Oh, I was expecting Venerable Dhamma to be here. I just didn't think it would be you." On the program it said, so I hope you're not disappointed. He also said he was surprised. I was surprised how good your talk was. Well, thank you very much. I'm an English monk ordained in England, Amaravati, in one of the Ajahn monasteries. But I've been living here in Sri Lanka for the last 15 years. Next month will be 15 years. So I was asked to, I asked about topics of talks. I said, any particular suggestions? And Rohanta gave me a couple of ideas, one of which was about expectations in practice and kind of impatience. So I come across this a bit myself. So Randa was saying that some people have they start to meditate and maybe they take up meditation later in their life or maybe not, but then people become impatient to see progress and perhaps sometimes unrealistically. I should say, if I speak too quickly, please don't be shy to just wave and say, "Bante, slow down," because many people find my English a bit hard to follow, because I tend to gabble and slur my words. So please do put your hand up and say, "Slow down, Bante." So when we meditate, think about in Buddhism. I was brought up a Catholic, and in Catholicism, in Christianity generally, I think you're taught that you get liberated or whatever. Salvation comes through the grace of God, and it's actually considered a sin, the sin of pride, to think that you can do it all by yourself. Whereas in Buddhism, the Buddha said exactly the opposite. He said, "Well, I can't do it for you. I can only point out the way. Each of us has to do walk the path ourselves. So you have to do the work yourself. But the Buddha is like a good friend who can tell you what to do, guide you." And now that the Buddha is not here to ask questions, our Kalyanamita, other good friends, are our teachers and our fellow practitioners. So that throws the onus, the responsibility is back upon ourselves, which is, that's the way it is. But a possible side effect of this, because this puts the emphasis on ourselves, and so it can be, and I've seen this in people, that it can create too much of a sense of self. You think about yourself a lot. Think on my practice is really important. So we're supposed to become selfless in Buddhism. Think of others. Generosity is very important, and the insight into anatta is fundamental. And yet, paradoxically, the emphasis on doing the practice yourself can mean that if we grasp that idea wrongly, we can become a bit self-obsessed, which is not the right attitude. I remember when I was, just a second, thank you. When I was a junior monk in the monasteries in England, we had a lot of work to do. And there was one monk, who shall remain nameless, who who's still a monk, but he never did much work. He was always never volunteered for anything. And I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, how it began, but we were talking about like the workload, and he was kind of justifying the fact that he didn't really put his weight. And he said to me, he said, "It's not for me, it's for my practice." And I thought, oh right, you're not being selfish then, it's your practice. And this idea that he didn't see that he was being selfish. The rest of us, well, we want to practice too. We'd all rather be meditating than cleaning the gutters and keep cooking. This may have been when we were still novices, anagarikas, doing cooking. And but the idea is like, oh, my practice, and people can become a bit obsessed about their practice, which is the opposite of the idea of Buddhism, the Buddhist teachings. So that's one part of it, and but also our progress, the idea of our progress in practice. When I'm meditating, how much progress have I made? And people can have unrealistic expectations. I remember reading, when I first came to Sri Lanka, I lived in Kandy for a few months, and the Dani, they offered the Dana in the morning, and it would be covered in newspapers for a couple of hours, and these were English language newspapers mostly brought along. Most of the Dayakas were like English speaking, and so I'd read odd bits and pieces from these newspapers, and I remember the one, there was a letter a man had written. I thought it was really funny. He'd written in, and he was saying, he's like, what's going wrong? The Buddha says in the Satipatthana Sutta that if you meditate for just 7 days and 7 nights like this, you'll become enlightened. Where are all the arahants? Why aren't our monks becoming enlightened? What are they doing wrong? And he's like moaning about the Sangha. The Sangha's obviously doing something wrong because they're not all arahants. And I remember thinking two things. I was thinking, well, how do you know they're not arahants? That's one of the things actually I've discovered. I think a number of times people have pointed out, they mentioned some monk from historical times in Sri Lanka, and they said, oh, so-and-so, he was the last arahant in Sri Lanka. I thought, what? How do you know he was the last arahant? Do you expect if there's an arahant now that they'll kind of announce it in the papers along with the kind of births and deaths and new arahants? So this idea, in Thailand they've got the opposite kind of thing, where they tend to think lots of monks are arahants. I think maybe they're a bit gullible, but if there are any arahants in Sri Lanka, they'll just be meditating quietly somewhere and they won't be kind of announcing it. But anyway, that was funny. But also this idea that, well, it says here in black and white, that kind of attitude, black and white, 7 days enlightened, maybe in one evening. What's going on? And of course, although what the Buddha was saying, it's possible for it to happen that quickly. If you're able to keep your mindfulness unbroken absolutely for an entire evening and a night. But we can't for the various reasons, the kilesas, the hindrances, all these things which get in our way. So the potential is there. But even the Buddha spent years practicing. And he's the Buddha. He's a lot more merit than the rest of us. And one of the misconceptions people can have reading the suttas, the way they describe things, they'll leave out a lot of stuff which in a modern, say, in a piece of journalism or in a modern novel or something, people would put in. So if something's happening, generally fill in the background. The suttas don't do that. So the Buddha might be giving a talk to somebody, and you in your mind's eye you picture the Buddha talking to this man, and then then the sutta just mentions there was 500 other monks there, and they all did this or that. I think, oh right, they weren't just alone. There was all these other people. Or it'll suddenly mention Ananda, who was there at the time, then piped up and said something. Or Sariputta, the time when he's one time when the Buddha's talking to somebody, and then it mentions later Sariputta was standing behind the Buddha fanning him, and the thought occurred to Sariputta, blah 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 blah. So it didn't mention Sariputta until he came into it. So one of the things is about time when they'll mention things happening in the sutta, and then it will say something else happens. And it doesn't mean it happens immediately afterwards. So when the Buddha, when he realized, okay, I've been doing all this, first he went to his meditation teachers, and he realized he was successful, but he realized this isn't the end of suffering. So then he tried all these austerities, which was the other main technique that people had in those days. And after, who knows how long, he doesn't specify how long, there must have been months or years of torturing himself, he realized this isn't working, and I've pushed it to the limit and it hasn't done any good. So then he thought, what else can I try? And then the memory came to him of sitting under a tree peacefully, and he realised that that was the path. So then he thought, right, well, I need to start eating properly. And then it's not in the suttas, it doesn't mention about sujata with the milk rice, that's the kind of commentaries or later tradition. But he started eating, basically. But he didn't, it's not as if he'd like, right, I better start eating. Sujata brings the milk rice, he goes and sits down, that evening he got enlightened. Reading the sutta, you might think that's what happened. But he obviously spent weeks, months, maybe years then practicing the jhanas, developing his meditation. It's clear because there's a sutta where he talks to Anuruddha. I think it's the one where he visits Anuruddha and these two other monks, and they're living in harmony together. And when the Buddha asks him, how's your meditation going? Anuruddha says, well, sometimes I get this, but he just says lights and a vision of lights and forms. So you're getting some kind of effect of samadhi. He says, but then it disappears and I haven't figured out why. And then the Buddha describes his own practice of developing samadhi. He says, yeah, well, this happened to me. I got this kind of, I get to a certain stage of samadhi, and then it'll all fall away. So I thought to myself, why is it falling away? And I realised, and he goes through a whole list of different things. So I can't remember what order it's in, but it's like doubt had arisen. So then I started again. And it takes a while, it takes days or sometimes weeks, to build for samadhi to get going. So he's talking about starting again from scratch. And his samadhi got better, he came back together again, and then it vanished again. And he thought, what happened then? And the Buddha realised, it was restlessness, there was too much restlessness. And so I started again. And so he had to keep on starting again, and then he'd lose it and start again. But each time he thought, whatever the mistake was last time, I'll try to make sure there's not too much of that this time. So each time, one time he got a bit frightened, or another time there was too much energy. So that's quite clear that the Buddha's spending weeks and months practicing. So he didn't just sit down, eat milk rice, get enlightened. So even for the Buddha it takes time. It took time. And so you read about the Arahants. Anuruddha took about a year and a half or something, apparently. Sariputta was only a couple of weeks and so forth. But these are, they had the Buddha teaching them. So the idea that it can happen just like that, it can, but that's not the way it usually works. And one way to think about it is that we've all been here before, we've all been coming back again and again and again. We may well have been around in the Buddha's time. They were that's like the low-hanging fruit. They were the top students. They all got enlightened 2,500 years ago. We're the slow ones. We're still working at it. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. This idea that nowadays it's impossible to get in line. The best thing you can do is make merit and wait for Maitreya to come along, which is ridiculous. Actually, a monk told me this joke. He lives in Sri Lanka. He told me this is what a joke people say in Sri Lanka about the next Buddha. He said, when Maitreya comes, what will be the first thing people ask him? The next Buddha, what's his name? So instead of looking for, instead of here he is, listen to his teaching, they're thinking about the next one. So we don't need to worry about Maitreya because we still have the Buddha's Dhamma, the Buddha Dhamma here from Gautama Buddha. So we can practice. And as long as that Dhamma is here, it's possible to make progress and become awakened. And in fact, even without the Buddha, it's possible to do it by yourself. You have to be a Buddha. So we can do it, but it takes time. We've got lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of kilesas and bad karmas to work through. But we don't have to deal with every single thing, because the good news is that with insight you can cut through all this. So when a person becomes an arahant, all the bad karma they made, it's all kind of cancelled. So you can cut through it all in just a moment of insight. So that's the positive news. But generally you have to work at it. So in the same way that you work at your meditation. So when you meditate, the thing to do is to focus on your meditation object, not to focus on the goal. So I remember like meditating, I've had this experience, you probably have the same thing, where you meditate, if you're just watching your breath or whatever your meditation object is, meditation can improve. But then if you start focusing or thinking about the result, or the samadhi you'll get from the meditation, then it disappears. Because you're not focusing on your meditation object anymore, you're focusing on the goal. You have to think about what you're doing. So you stay in the present moment. So Anuruddha again, when you probably heard of, it's quite a well-known, very well-known sutta, the eight thoughts of a great man. So this was when Anuruddha was sitting in meditation, and these thoughts occurred to him, and this is before he was awakened. And he thought, this Dhamma is for one who is energetic. I don't know the whole list, but one who is energetic, one who has mindfulness, one who is few of wishes. And most of these things were true of Anuruddha. In fact, they're all true of Anuruddha, I think. One who has got concentration and mindfulness. And then the Buddha comes along and says, very good, and praises it. And says, and here's an eighth thought. And the eighth one was, it's that this Dhamma is for one who delights in non-proliferation, so which is like excess thinking. And this seems to have been Anuruddha's weak point. So actually, he's praising Anuruddha, and then he goes back to the other monks and then teaches them this very same thing, which Anuruddha had thought of, these 7 thoughts plus the 8th one. The Buddha is saying, and don't think too much. So although he's praising him, there's also a subtle admonition there. Admonishment. It's like, yeah, so these are very good thoughts and everything, but less of the thinking maybe, more of the meditating. And there's quite a funny sutta where Anuruddha is talking to Sariputta, and Anuruddha says, again I have to paraphrase, but he says, with the divine eye I can see people passing away and into new rebirths. The Buddha declared Anuruddha to be the foremost with the divine eye of his disciples. My mindfulness is firm. My concentration is one-pointed. I've got unwavering energy, and yet I'm still not enlightened. I still haven't broken through. And Sariputta's response is really deflating. He says, when you think to yourself, I've got the divine eye, that's just conceit. And when you think to yourself, I've got energy, mindfulness, concentration, that's restlessness. And when you think to yourself, but I'm still not enlightened, that's just remorse. Stop thinking about those things and just focus on your meditation. So, and that basically, and then later, Anuruddha stops thinking about those things and focuses on his meditation, and he becomes awakened. So, and those words, he said, the second one, he said, that's restlessness, that's uddhacca. And the third one, that's your remorse, that's kukucca. So those two, that's the translation of, that's the Pali of the four, whatever, one of the hindrances, restlessness and remorse, uddhacca kukucca. So he's saying that, you're thinking about your meditation, but that's restlessness and remorse. Just stop thinking about it, get on with the meditation. So it's the same point there, that we can think too much about our practice, worry about how's my practice going, and it becomes this big thing. How am I improving? Has my meditation developed? Has my practice developed? Instead of thinking about your practice like that, just be doing it. And your sati, mindfulness, is what we should rely upon. If our mindfulness is strong, then naturally Dhamma Vichaya arises. And that's a wise reflection, the investigation of states, the second enlightenment factor, arises naturally from mindfulness, where you notice what's happening in meditation. You take interest and you notice. This arises naturally. But we don't need to spend the time thinking about it, worrying about it, because then the Dhamma is leading to suffering instead of leading to joy. So fairly recently I read that, again, psychology, there's quite a lot of insights from psychology, these experimental psychology. They point out a lot of things the Buddha pointed out, but in very specific detail. And one of the things they've found is that if you, in terms of motivating yourself to do something, to a certain extent, it's good to imagine yourself successful in doing something. But if you focus too much, I can't remember exactly what the study said now, but it said if you focus too much or imagine yourself having succeeded, and it might be something like, say, a new exercise regime and getting fit and stuff. If you spend any time thinking about imagining how it will be when you've got it, that actually undermines the amount of energy people put into achieving the goal. If you spend too much time thinking about having succeeded, you actually work less at it. I can't remember the particular details. But there was a book I read about these climbers, and there was two interesting points about Dhamma in there, but one in particular that was relevant was this. So these two climbers, they climbed to the top of this mountain in South America. They were very, very remote, many days away. Even their base camp, these two guys, where they were camping, was days away from civilization, and they climbed to the top of this mountain. And one of them had fallen basically. The other one thought he'd fallen to his death, fallen from the mountain through a crevasse. He already had a broken leg, fell into a crevasse, and his friend left him thinking he was dead. But he wasn't dead. He was at the bottom of this crevasse on this glacier with a broken leg. And incredibly, he managed to get himself out of this crevasse and started crawling back. And he was just motivating himself to think, right, I'll go 100 years, I'll reach that bit over there in the next 10 minutes. And he would go crawling with his broken leg across this glacier and focusing on just each step along the way. But then after a while, after that day, he was like 3 days before he got back. After about a day of this, he started to realize, I might just make it. I'm going to make it. I should be able to make it. And then he started kind of dreaming about how great it would be back when he got some food and some water. Because even though there's ice everywhere, you can't drink the ice. And he was dying of thirst, actually. I mean, he was very, very thirsty. And he started fantasizing about how to get back. And he said that's when he lost it. Next thing he knew, he was wandering around delirious, wandering around in circles. And he completely lost his focus because he was sort of daydreaming about getting back. And it was almost the death of him. Actually, the other point was that what got him going was he couldn't even stand eventually, he couldn't get to his feet, he couldn't do anything. And then it suddenly occurred to him that it's been 3 days, my friend's going to pack up and leave, almost certainly, but he's gone by tomorrow morning. And suddenly he just got straight to his feet. That kind of aroused him. But he did make it back because he told the story. But focusing on the goal too much instead of focusing on the present is a mistake. So we just focus on our practice. Like the Buddha said to Anuruddha, just do the practice. Or Sariputta said to him, rather, just stop thinking about all this stuff and stop thinking about the fact I'm not enlightened yet. That's just remorse, uddhacca kukucca, just practice. And so just as the practice in our present moment, in our meditation sessions, you just, every time you realise your mind's wandered, you go back. And if you find yourself thinking about the practice, and if it's making you miserable, then obviously there's something going wrong, because the Buddha said this is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end, this Dhamma. And this is one of the great things about the Dhamma, is that it's not like you've got to, if you're a good boy and you have a miserable life, like some of these religious sects, some aspects, types of Buddhists, not Buddhists, some types of Christians, some sects of Islam, and perhaps some sects of Buddhism, for I know, they teach that you've got to really punish yourself in this life, but you'll be rewarded in the next. So they live miserable lives, but the Buddha said, hey, this is enjoyable now. So even if it wasn't, it'd be worth doing, but it is. So if your practice is making you miserable, you're doing something wrong. There was again, another book I remember from when I was in Anagarika. There was a book that arrived for the library. I never read it. It was some American woman's account of her spiritual journey and meeting gurus in India and stuff. And this other Anagarika with me, he's pointed to it. That woman, he said, all of her suffering comes from her desire to be enlightened. So he'd read this book. He said, she's suffering enormously. It's all about her suffering, her struggle. It's all from her desire to be enlightened. So this could have raised the question, would we be better off just not bothering to become enlightened? Of course, the problem wasn't the desire to become enlightened. It was the way she grasped it. And that's one of the things people ask sometimes. It's like, well, if we're supposed to get rid of desire, how can you strive to be enlightened if you're getting rid of desire? What about the desire to become enlightened? But these are different things. So the difference between chanda and tanha. So tanha is craving, and chanda is just the intention. You know, so chanda is a good thing. Chanda, the intention, to do something. But the tanha is this craving. So and that's the problem, is that we tend to crave. You know, craving for nirvana is bad, and that is one of the hindrances. It's a klesa. But chanda is just the intention to do a certain thing. You make the intention, I'm going to do this, and you aspire. The aspirations, you know, the word way of putting it, the aspiration. So the aspiration is important, and that arises because of faith, because of the suffering we have. So we get this aspiration to be free from it. But with that aspiration, then, we put the effort into doing the work. And the aspiration is there, but not this craving. And it's difficult to, you have to be careful, basically, to see, is there a craving? Am I craving too much? So we have the aspiration, but not the, if you don't give up on the aspiration, you think, oh, why bother? So it's a difficult, there's a balancing act to be done there, because the Buddha talks a lot about virya and putting forth effort and energy. One of the things Anuruddha said, you know, this path is practiced for somebody with effort, energy, not without. And again, that's the kind of balance we have to get right. One of the things that before I'd ever been to Thailand, I didn't come to Buddhism through reading about Thai monks and things. I read the suttas. And when I saw these Thai monks, because I was ordained in the Thai tradition, Ajahn, Brahm, and Sameda were both from Wat Pah Pong. And these monks, we had a lot of books from these Thai masters, and there's very good meditation teachers in Thailand. Am I talking too quickly, by the way? Am I okay? Is that a thumbs up? Okay, good. One of the things, when I read those books, or glanced at them, because I never really read them much, they kind of put me off, because it all seems so kind of not gung-ho is not the right word, but like a bit almost macho, and like, oh, you've got to strive, you've got to really struggle, strive. And I thought, oh God, I don't like this. Later I read, there's a monk who did these interviews with some of these monks, and this American monk, and his interviews and questions and answers. And that, reading them actually, and talking to that monk himself when he came to Perth, it gave a different kind of view of it. They're just talking about putting in effort, but depending upon how you portray it, it can sound like really struggling hard and it's all really tough and difficult, or just the point about just not slackening off, just not being lazy, basically. And so then later, while I was in Perth, then I thought, oh, actually, maybe I would like to go and visit Thailand and see these monks, and impressive monks. So I did, and it's a bit different, talking to them through a translator. But the Buddha does talk a lot about energy and developing, samvega, developing the attitude, and it depends upon what kind of person you're like. So if you're trying too hard, you need to relax. So Ajahn Brahm said to me once, he said, because I was having headaches. It turned out to be because I needed glasses. I didn't have glasses. I was studying Pali. But Ajahn Brahm said, well, maybe you're getting samadhi headache. He said, when I go to Singapore all the time, you get these people with samadhi headache. They meditate and they're getting a headache here. They're trying to watch the breath, or they're trying to watch whatever. And I was pretty sure that I thought, no, if anything, my problem is more to do with being a bit too lazy. You know, the simile of the lute, which is another brilliant simile of if the string is too tight. Who was that monk? I've forgotten the name of that monk. That wasn't Anurag. Who was the monk who... Anyway, whoever it was, he was practicing too hard, and the Buddha said, it's just like a lute string, the string of an instrument. If it's too tight, the sound is not right. But if it's too loose, the sound is not right. And, you know, your lute string is a bit too tight. You just need to relax a bit. So that's the thing, you see. So we need to know, do I need to tighten up my practice or to relax a bit more? Personally, I tend to think, when I listen to Ajahn Brahm, I'll be on retreat with Ajahn Brahm, I think, Ajahn, I think you're overdoing it with the kind of relax kind of thing. Yeah, if you feel, we're on a meditation retreat, and he's telling people, if you fancy it, just go and lie down and have a nap in the afternoon. And I'm thinking, I don't know, is this the right advice? But it depends on the individual. And Ajahn Brahm knows his disciples, so I guess he knows. But so effort is important, but it has to be right effort, and it has to be the middle way. So the middle way between torturing yourself and overindulgence. So with the practice, so generally knowing the right kind of level of effort to put in, and not being unrealistic about how long it's going to take. Took the Buddha a long time. But the Buddha, again thinking back to that the advice he was giving to Anuruddha, he, when the Buddha felt his meditation falling apart, the light and visions, it all fell away. He didn't kind of say, oh God, it's all gone wrong, where's my meditation gone? He just thought, what happened there? It's interest, you had interest in it. You had this interest in your meditation. He thought to himself, okay, what happened? Okay, I was a bit too excited. Okay, next time I'll have to make sure that I don't fall into that particular trap. So there, and that shows an important aspect of the Buddha's attitude to his practice. As he thought about it and thought, well, what's going wrong? So after, he learned those from his two previous teachers. He learned these meditations, and they said, that's it, you've got it, the same as us. But the Buddha, he reflected on it, he thought about it, and thought, yeah, he didn't just think, great, I've got my meditation together. He thought, yeah, but this isn't it, is it? This is not the end of suffering, this is just a pleasant here and now. So then he tried something else. He tried the austerities, for a long time by the sound of it, almost starved himself to death. And when it didn't work, he didn't lose hope or give up. The other 5 ascetics that he'd given up. He just thought, maybe I need to think about something else. So that attitude of investigation, interest in your meditation, is very, very important. And if you take an interest in it, rather than worrying about it, then it becomes, instead of being a worry, it becomes interesting. It's something, it's interesting. This is an interesting project, like a hobby. Think of it as a hobby. I have this, what's your hobby? I meditate. It's really good, actually. But you don't talk about it too much. Last week I had this and that. But think of it as an interesting thing you do. And then it becomes a source of joy. And also, it's like if you're living a lay life, then there's other things in life as well. So not to become obsessed with the practice. Some people become obsessed with their hobbies, don't they? And they only talk about their hobby, and they become boring. It's like, okay, I'm not interested in your stamp collecting. But so not to become obsessed with it, because you have other things. You have family. You have, if you don't have any of those things, then ordain. Go and live in the forest. But if you're not, then presumably there's these other things in your life. So remember to smell the roses. Smell the roses? Is that the phrase? Right? You know, to enjoy life while you're going along. I say it's good in the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end. It's supposed to be an enjoyable part. So, and even if you're not getting the pleasure directly from the meditation, you know, you have to be getting pleasure in your life. The Buddha said about monks, he said, if they, you need to learn to get pleasure from your meditation, because if you don't, then you'll seek it elsewhere. You'll seek it through sense pleasures. You can't achieve the pleasure of meditation. I mean, there's a certain amount of pleasure just in seclusion and living peacefully. But you need to learn to enjoy solitude. The Buddha said it's difficult to enjoy solitude. You need to learn to enjoy those things. I think that was another thing Anuruddha said. For someone who enjoys seclusion, this path is for someone who enjoys seclusion. But if you're not living a secluded life, and getting really profound meditation all the time, you need some kind of joy in your life. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. This is what the Buddha said about when he was talking about what to do with your money, with your wealth. As well as saving a bit for later, giving to the poor, giving to monks like me, and it was also enjoy it. That was the next thing he said, was enjoy it, make yourself happy, make your wife and husband happy, make your children, your friends happy. Yeah, spend it and enjoy it. So this is the advice of later, to enjoy your life, but to meditate. So you need that balance. You need to make sure that you're not going to one extent or the other, and to be realistic. I mean, I don't know how much of a problem this is for people. As I say, I mean, there was that woman who wrote that book, and I know people can become a bit obsessed with it. Whether it's a big problem, I don't know. But, I mean, I used to play a game called Go. You may have heard of it a few years ago. It's a Japanese game, board game, and a strategy game. And it was in the news before ChatGPT and everything came along. The big breakthrough in artificial intelligence was in 2016, and they developed the same kind of thing, neural network, which beat the best Go player in the world. So Go is far more complex than chess. So chess back in 1997 or 99, the best chess player in the world was beaten by a computer. But it took till 2016 for this artificial intelligence to beat this Korean player. And this was big news because nobody expected it to happen for decades. Anyway, but that's what, in case that rings any bells. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The important thing is it's a board game of strategy. And I used to play it when I was a layman. And one of the things about it is it's got this ranking system. It's very easy. If you're playing somebody who's even quite a lot stronger or weaker, you can just adjust. You just ask them, well, what grade are you? He says, I'm 6Q, or I'm 3Q. So that means there's a 3-grade difference. If one person just has 3 handicap stones, it makes it an even game. And it works very well. So players tend to know their grade, because if you're playing somebody else, first thing you ask, well, what are you? I'm 8, I'm 3, okay, 5-stone handicap. And then you both get a good game. But the problem is, and they often say this to beginners in Go, don't obsess about your rank. The downside is, and I found this happening to me, so gradually your rank goes up, and up, and at first it increases very quickly. You start at about 35, and very quickly down to 20, and then the teens, and then you make it into single digits. But then you start obsessing about the rank you're at. You start thinking, 8Q. I've been 8Q for a while now, and I've reached 7Q and all this. And you're no longer enjoying the game. You're thinking about, you lose a game, you say, oh no, that's going to affect my rank. Or you win a game, and you think, oh no, yeah, great, okay, my rank can go. Instead of just playing the game. And before I knew about the rank, I used to play, and each game was enjoyable, whether you won or lost. It's nicer to win, but it can be really enjoyable when you're losing, if it's a really good game. But then you become obsessed with this thing. And I see it happening, and it's very common amongst Go players. but I still couldn't actually stop it happening. Actually, I never did kind of get over that obsession with rank. And it's the same kind of thing, really. You stop enjoying. I mean, why do we meditate? There's various reasons, but generally it's to be happy. Whether it's nibbana or just happier in day-to-day life. But if you focus on it in the wrong way, then it can become a problem. So there's a great, the Buddha was talking specifically, he was talking about living the monk's life, actually. There's a great simile. There's a quote, the Buddha said, I don't know where exactly it is, it might be in the Dhammapada actually, but we chant it in England, in the Thai tradition, they chant it at the Patimokkha every 2 weeks when the monks meet. They chant this thing, the holy life, just as if you grasp a blade of grass, if you grasp it wrongly, you can cut your hand. And this happened to me when I was a kid, actually. I couldn't believe it. There was a nice, soft lawn in our garden, and I was playing with the grass, and I just twisted it the wrong way. And a blade of grass is very sharp. And this is soft grass. This is lawn grass you have in England. But it's very sharp, but it's soft, so you don't cut yourself on it. But because it twisted around in a certain way, and it became stiff, I sliced my finger. I couldn't believe it. What happened? I sliced my finger right open with just this soft grass. And the Buddha used that as a simile. He said, you can cut your hand on a blade of grass if you grasp it wrong. And he was specifically talking about the monk life. He was saying, if you live the monk's life wrong, badly, it can drag you to hell. It's supposed to take you to awakening, but you lead a bad life and it will drag you to hell. But that's generally, that's the true about practice, generally. If we grasp it wrong, so if we don't see the difference, we don't learn the difference between chanda, between desire and intention or aspiration. That's actually that word desire. It's interesting. The early English translations of of the suttas, they weren't very good translations, but they were the only ones that existed. And but those in the early volumes, somebody pointed out, I think in the dictionary, Pali Dictionary, pointed out that in one of the early volumes they used the word desire, translated 16 different Pali terms, 16 different Pali words, and the translator just used the word desire for all of them. So one of them would have been tanha, one of them would have been chanda, and another 14 different terms, because there weren't enough. Well, one, they didn't understand the subtle differences well enough, so they just used the word desire. But also, there aren't the English words to describe these subtle states. So there is a difference between craving and desire in the sense of intention. Well, intention, again, that's another Pali term, means something else, but aspiration, I suppose. Anyway, so that's the basic takeaway: is aim for have the intention for the goal, but to forget about it. I think Ajahn Brahm, he uses that simile actually. Ajahn Brahm gives a very good simile of this. He says when he gets taken into Perth every weekend, the driver drives him. He just gets in the car and lets the driver do it. And he's not a backseat driver, he doesn't give him directions. And he can relax. He relaxes. And just, I'll get there when I get there. And just leaves it up to the driver. So it's the same thing in your practice. You set the intention, and then you just get on with the moment-to-moment practice. Don't obsess about how long it's going to take. Don't be impatient. But you don't slack off. But that's just a matter of in the present moment. You make sure that you're not slackening off. That's a present moment thing. That's not a future thought thing. That's just how am I doing right now, not how far have I got. Once you start thinking about how far you've got, and you can't see, that's another important point actually, is that if you're thinking about, I've been meditating so long, and I was meditating for a few years before I had any noticeable breakthrough, but it must have been improvement. I'm sure there was. And I know that when you're on retreat, I noticed myself actually later on that I'd gone retreat, and if it was like a dull retreat and not particularly inspiring one, you felt after 2 days doing nothing, you never had any good meditation or anything. But coming out, I began to realize that actually I'm a lot calmer than I was when I went in. I didn't feel any different. There wasn't any profound difference. But actually, the shock of going back into London after being on a retreat in a monastery, you realise, oh, my mind has changed quite a bit actually. Living in the forest, just living in the forest alone, just by itself, a matter of sense restraint, there's fewer things to see and everything. It calms your mind down just that, just living in the forest, even if you're not meditating. And again, a very good simile the Buddha gave about the way of looking at your practice is a workman and the axe handle. There's an axe, some kind of tool. So some carpenter or workman who has this is his craft. So he's got this implement, I can't remember what it was, an axe or something, that he's using every day. And as he uses it, gradually it's being worn away. And after many years of using the same axe, this axe kind of fits to the shape of his hand. I mean, it's moulded to his body. But each day, you can't see any difference at all. He picks it up, uses it a bit. You can't look at it and go, oh, look at that, it's been worn away. It's absolutely negligible. So little that you couldn't imagine anything's happened at all. And yet, a number of years later, you look at it and it's completely changed its shape. I remember my brother telling me, my brother's obsessive about cycling. And I remember asking why this particular type of saddles, these expert, these keen cyclists use. They're not like the kind of saddles you get on the kind of bikes people buy just to go shopping. They've got nice, big, comfy, soft saddle. But they've got these hard saddles. I said, what is it with this saddle? He says, well, it's leather thing. Eventually, the leather, it softens, and then it kind of molds itself to to the individual rider. And he said, if your bike gets nicked, the thing you miss most is not the whole frame of the bike, it's the saddle. He said, no, I've lost my saddle. It'll take years to get another saddle that's fit to the shape of your bum, basically, again. You don't mind the fact you've lost your frame, your wheels, everything else. But no, my saddle, it's taken years to get a comfortable saddle. So this is the way these things work. And but you can't see in any short time that the thing has changed. And it's the same with your practice. You look back, if you just look back on your practice, or yesterday, last week, last month, last year, it's negligible. At least you can't see it, but it has changed. And so when the times when you notice changes in your meditation, that's just building on what's gone before. So as long as you're practicing, there's changes happening. So not to despair. As I said, I meditated for years and nothing happened at all. And then one day I went on a retreat and it was completely different. But it wasn't just that I'd been doing it wrong for 3 years and then I did it right that day, that week. It was just that I'd been building the conditions. So to encourage. So in a way, this talk is like, I don't want to give a talk saying to discourage, saying, you think you're going to get enlightened soon? Forget it. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's like, get real. What I'm saying is that not to be impatient, and don't assume you're not making any progress. I was told that this is a big problem for people. Certain types of people worry too much about their practice. They're too impatient. Like the guy who wrote that letter. Where are the answers? So to be encouraged in that, well, actually, you're probably making more progress than you realise. But don't expect to see results like you wouldn't expect to look at the handle at the end of the day, the first day's work. And go, hang on, it looks just the same. Obviously, it's going to take time. Anyway, that's what I had to say. We've got a little bit of time. If anyone's got any questions about that, or anyone wants to say, Lanka, you're wrong. Does anyone want to ask anything about that? If not, we can stop there. And then, well, I don't know what happens later. I'll ask him later. I just got here this morning, so I don't know exactly what the program is. Okay, so strive on with heedfulness, and then it shall be in half an hour or something. No, 11:15. Okay. Right. So what? Just walk, do some walking, or can carry on meditating.